So next up is Romanticism. Romanticism was during 1820 to 1900. During this time period, this is an exploration of exotic, fictional, and/or fantastic art, and you'll see there's a lot of really weird, interesting, really creepy stuff that people are painting right now. And then this takes place during the Industrial Revolution. So some famous artists from this time period, you got Bierstadt. So this is something that, is not that weird. This is a little different from what other artists are doing, but it's very photorealistic. But at the same time, has that fantasy element to it with these mountains in the back and things like that. Coal. So you're starting to get very, very detailed landscapes. And these paintings are really, really huge in person. Fuseli, The Nightmare. So this is more of what this time period is like. It's very, very weird and interesting and attention getting. And the idea was to really make people uncomfortable when they saw these paintings and make them question what's real and what's fake. And by adding these elements of made up creatures but looking realistic, it made you question as an audience what you were seeing and whether or not it was real. Then you have people like Eugene Delacroix. So this is Liberty Leading the People. You may have seen this because Coldplay used it as their album cover for Viva La Vida years ago. Then the first big person that we're going to briefly talk about is John Constable. So he was an English landscape painter that spent most of his life painting the land around his home. He rebelled against the artistic culture of the time that told him to paint images from his imagination rather than nature himself. So he was going back to, these classical landscapes and peaceful things. And by doing that, he was the rebel at the time because he wasn't, doing these outrageous imagination type artworks. But he made a great career off of painting these landscapes, and he sold a lot of these. And you can see the whole idea is to have these vast open areas that help you scan everything almost like a panoramic photo instead of just zooming into something like, just this horse and buggy. And the really, really famous artist from this time period is Francisco de Goya. So he was a Spanish painter and printmaker. He was employed for some time by the Spanish royal court, and then Goya made a clear break from neoclassical painters. So this is the guy that a lot of people were trying to follow at the time because he was doing these weird, outrageous paintings that when you saw those, you would say, oh, that's a de Goya for sure. So you can see, like, he would do these portraits of these royal courts, and everyone has these kind of weird, not very realistic faces that were in his style. And you'll notice this through a lot of his paintings that everyone looks very similar. But you can tell that he still has that skill. Like, you can feel that texture. You know what that texture feels like on all of these pieces of clothing, but it still has this weird element to the face. And this is just kind of comparing what was before this time period. So this is more neoclassical, very realistic looking. You could point this person out in a crowd. This person, maybe not. So there's another example of how much it's changed in just a short time period. Now, this is what he really is known for. A lot of people study is his printmaking. So if you've never done a print, what this is specifically is he took probably a piece of metal and etched into it with a really sharp tool, and he would carve away pieces of it, put black ink on top of it, and then print it, kind of like how they used to print old books. So these are all prints or drawings, but you can tell they're very violent. And he does a lot of stuff about war because at the time, a lot of people were too afraid to cover, what was happening with the war. And if they did, it was just the battlefield or just soldiers. Nothing in your face, nothing that would make you feel disturbed, like this image right here, where it shows this person with their head and arms and all their limbs chopped off. It's really violent and really in your face, and it makes you question war and what's happening and why is there war going on at this time period. So very, very brutal. And you'll notice it's not just men. He wanted to show how women were involved, how children were involved, how big of a toll it would take on people. And then this is his most famous painting. This is the 3rd of May. I would recommend, like I was saying with other stories, is Googling the 3rd of May so that you can know exactly what happened to this. It's a long story, a long, complicated story where these soldiers were coming in and murdering all these people. And then he also liked to do still lives of weird objects. So back in this time period, it would be a lot of fruits and vegetables and just things that were pleasant to look at. And now you're looking at meat or rotting meat. And then here comes his more fantasy like paintings. So these people that are floating up in the air. So just very dark and creepy. And you'll see how the art grows throughout time and how people take these ideas and they make them even creepier, like Salvador Dali, who did the melting clocks. This is one of his biggest influences. And then one of his other most famous paintings is Saturn devouring one of his children. So again, just super intense and dark and graphic. And if you did watch that Nerd Writer video that I was talking about in the previous PowerPoint, he also did another video about this painting that will blow your mind. And I highly recommend that you watch it because it's pretty interesting. Also at this time, the music, you had Tchaikovsky and Wagner. So he was a popular Russian composer who composed Swan Lake and the Nutcracker. So chances are you probably have heard these. I would recommend going on here and clicking and watching just a little bit of this and listening to them just for a second, because you'll know what that is. You've heard these before. And then with Wagner, he was a German composer, theater director, and conductor, and he's primarily known for his operas. And then with Romantic theater, this is where melodrama starts. So this comes from music drama. Music was used to increase emotions or to signify characters. And it simplified a moral universe. So good and evils are embodied in stock characters. So if you see a melodrama, you can really get a clear idea of who's good and who's the bad villains and things like that. But that's it for this one. This is one of the shortest ones. um After you finish with this, wait before you do the final exam, the final project thing. We're going to wait and open that up just a little later in the year.